In the darkest depths of the Black Forest, where ancient pines tower like sentinels over secrets that refuse to die, a mystery has haunted historians, engineers, and conspiracy theorists for nearly 80 years, a mystery that begins not with a discovery, but with a vanishing, the disappearance of something so impossible, so technologically inexplicable for its time, that even mentioning it risks being dismissed as fantasy. But what if it wasn't fantasy? What if, during the final desperate months of World War II, when Germany was collapsing under the weight of Allied bombardment and Soviet advance, a group of brilliant scientists working in a classified military research facility called Der Riese, the giant, actually constructed a device so revolutionary, so terrifyingly advanced, that it could have altered the course of the war itself? This is the story of Die Glocke, the bell, a machine that would become the stuff of legend, lost to history, whispered about in shadows, and now, according to emerging evidence and the testimonies of those who claim to have worked on it, possibly being reconstructed somewhere in the world. The legend of Die Glocke begins with eyewitness accounts, the most compelling coming from Igor Witkowski, a Polish journalist who, in the 1990s, interviewed an elderly German engineer named Jakob Sperl, who claimed to have worked at Project Riese, the secretive Nazi weapons development complex hidden within the Sudeten Mountains. Sperl described a bell-shaped device constructed from a heavy metallic alloy, approximately 9 meters tall and around 4 meters in diameter, capable of rotating at extraordinary speeds while generating some kind of electromagnetic phenomenon that witnesses described as creating a strange violet light and producing a sickly sweet smell that would linger in the air for weeks after testing. The device allegedly consumed enormous amounts of electrical power and was powered by a substance called Zerum 525, a mercury-based compound whose exact composition remains unknown and whose properties, according to the accounts, seemed to defy the laws of physics as they were understood. According to these testimonies, Die Glocke was being tested in an underground chamber, and the results of these tests were nothing short of miraculous. Plants exposed to the device's field allegedly withered and died, animals became disoriented and aggressive, and in one shocking account, a cow was reportedly found fused to the ground, its molecular structure somehow altered by exposure to whatever energy the bell was producing. The testimonies suggested that Die Glocke was not merely a weapon in the traditional sense, but something far more fundamental, a device that could manipulate the very fabric of space and time itself, a machine that represented a leap in human technology so vast that it belonged more to science fiction than to the historical record of 1945. The question that immediately presents itself is simple yet profound. Was Die Glocke real, or was it the product of wartime propaganda, wishful thinking, and the human tendency to transform mystery into myth? The evidence for its existence is frustratingly circumstantial, yet intriguing enough that serious researchers and historians have devoted decades to investigating it. We know, with absolute certainty, that Project Riese was a real facility, that Nazi Germany was indeed investing enormous resources into exotic weapons research as the war drew to a close, and that many of the scientists and engineers who worked on these classified projects simply vanished at the end of the war, spirited away into the shadows by both American and Soviet intelligence services who were desperate to capture German scientific knowledge before their rivals could. We also know that in the immediate post-war period, hundreds of German scientists were interviewed about their work, but the most sensitive and classified research remained hidden, discussed only in the most secure military facilities, if discussed at all. The end of World War II did not mark the end of interest in Die Glocke, if it ever existed. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one in which the bell moved from the realm of Nazi weapons programs into the realm of Cold War espionage, rumor, and military research. By the 1950s and 1960s, Die Glocke had become something of a legend in intelligence circles, whispered about in classified briefings, investigated by both Western and Soviet agencies, and gradually incorporated into the mythology of Nazi science, alongside stories of flying saucers, time machines, and dimensional portals that allegedly Nazi scientists had been developing in their final desperate years. But the legend never truly died, and in recent years, with the rise of internet culture, alternative history communities, and the democratization of information, Die Glocke has experienced a remarkable resurgence in popular consciousness, with documentaries, podcasts, and countless online forums dedicated to investigating whether the bell was real, where it might be, and most intriguingly, whether someone might be trying to rebuild it. The question of whether Die Glocke could be rebuilt is where the story becomes truly fascinating, because it forces us to consider what we actually know about Nazi scientific capabilities and what we might be missing from the historical record. The Nazis were indeed developing weapons and technologies that were decades ahead of their time. We know about the V-1 and V-2 rockets, the first jet aircraft, advanced submarine technology, and numerous other innovations that gave them a technological edge, at least in certain specialized areas. The documents that survived the war, the testimonies of captured scientists, and the vast archives of German research that were captured by Allied forces suggest that while Nazi Germany was impressive in certain fields of engineering and applied science, they were not advancing at a pace that would have allowed them to develop something as fantastical as a working anti-gravity device or a time machine. Yet there are tantalizing gaps in the historical record. Whole research programs that existed but whose details remain classified or lost, and entire facilities that were destroyed before they could be fully documented. In this context, Die Glocke represents not necessarily an impossibility, but rather a question mark, a symbol of what might have been hidden, what might have been destroyed, and what we might never truly know about the secret weapons development efforts of the Third Reich. Now we come to the most provocative part of this story, the part that transforms Die Glocke from a historical mystery into a contemporary concern, and that is the question of whether someone is building it again. In recent years, there have been claims, mostly circulating on the fringes of the internet and in alternative history communities, that certain advanced research facilities, possibly affiliated with governments or with private military contractors, might be attempting to reconstruct Die Glocke or create something functionally similar to it. These claims are largely speculative, based on circumstantial evidence, anonymous testimony, and the kind of pattern matching that is common in conspiracy theory communities. Yet, they are worth examining carefully because they raise important questions about the nature of classified scientific research, about what we do and do not know, about the capabilities of our governments and our corporations, and about whether history truly repeats itself or whether we are forever destined to discover and rediscover the same dangerous knowledge. The most compelling of these contemporary claims involves alleged sightings and reports from individuals claiming to work or have worked at advanced aerospace and defense facilities, particularly those associated with programs investigating exotic propulsion systems, anti-gravity effects, and other cutting-edge technologies that exist at the very edge of known physics. These individuals describe research programs that bear a striking resemblance to the descriptions of Die Glocke that have circulated for decades. Programs involving rapidly rotating structures, exotic materials, electromagnetic fields, and effects that seem to contradict conventional understanding of how the universe works. Whether these programs actually exist, whether they represent genuine attempts to recreate or reverse engineer Nazi technology, or whether they are simply modern scientists independently pursuing the same lines of inquiry that Nazi researchers might have followed, remains unknown. What is certain is that advanced nations around the world are investing enormous resources into understanding the nature of gravity, into developing new forms of propulsion, and into exploring the boundaries of what physics tells us is possible. The U.S. military, for example, has officially acknowledged that it has investigated the phenomenon known as unidentified anomalous phenomena, and has released declassified videos showing objects moving in ways that seem to defy conventional aerodynamics. Scientists at major universities are investigating anti-gravity effects. Theoretical physicists are publishing papers on exotic propulsion systems, and aerospace companies are developing technologies that would have seemed like magic just a few decades ago. In this context, the question of whether someone is trying to build a modern version of Die Glocke becomes not a question of whether it is possible, but a question of whether the technological capability now exists to succeed where Nazi scientists may or may not have failed. The similarities between contemporary research into anti-gravity and exotic propulsion and the descriptions of Die Glocke are striking enough to be more than coincidence, yet vague enough that they could easily be the product of our tendency to see patterns where none exist. We know that rotating objects can produce unusual electromagnetic effects. We know that powerful electromagnetic fields can produce effects on matter that seem to defy conventional understanding. And we know that the boundary between theoretical physics and applied engineering has become extraordinarily thin, with discoveries in one field immediately finding application in another. We also know that governments keep the vast majority of their advanced research classified, that military contractors operate with minimal transparency, and that the public record of what is actually being developed in secret facilities represents only a fraction of what is actually happening. In this environment of secrecy, classified research, and the genuine advancement of the boundary of human knowledge, the idea that someone might be attempting to reconstruct Die Glocke, or something functionally equivalent to it, seems less like wild speculation and more like a reasonable hypothesis about what might be happening in the hidden laboratories of the world's most advanced nations. The ethical implications of such research, if it is happening, are profound and troubling. The original descriptions of Die Glocke, if they are accurate, suggest a device capable of producing effects on biological matter that would render it extraordinarily dangerous as a weapon, a device that could kill without firing a shot, a device that could alter the very molecular structure of matter itself. Such a device would represent the kind of ultimate weapon that military planners have dreamed of since time immemorial, a weapon that is perfectly efficient, perfectly destructive, and perfectly horrible. The thought that governments or corporations might be investing resources into recreating such a device is enough to give anyone pause, to make us question what our institutions are doing in the shadows, and to wonder whether we, as a species, are destined to forever pursue the most destructive knowledge available to us. Yet there is another possibility, one that is equally important to consider, and that is that the research being conducted under the umbrella of exotic propulsion systems, anti-gravity effects, and advanced physics might be motivated not by a desire to recreate Nazi weapons, but by genuine scientific curiosity, by the desire to push the boundaries of what we understand about the universe, and by the hope that such understanding might lead to technological breakthroughs that could benefit humanity rather than destroy it. Anti-gravity research, if successful, could revolutionize transportation, making space travel cheap and accessible, allowing us to move massive structures with minimal energy expenditure, and fundamentally transforming how we interact with the physical world. Understanding the nature of gravity and electromagnetism in deeper ways could lead to new sources of clean energy, to medical breakthroughs that seem impossible within our current understanding of physics, and to technologies that could solve some of humanity's most pressing problems. In this context, the question of whether Die Glocke is being recreated becomes not a question of whether a weapon is being developed, but a question of whether we are on the edge of a scientific revolution that could transform human civilization. So where does the truth actually lie? Is Die Glocke real, or is it a myth born from wartime rumor and post-war speculation? Is someone building it again, Or are we simply seeing patterns in contemporary research that we want to see, projecting the legends of the past onto the scientific projects of the present? The honest answer is that we do not know, and may never know, unless someone with access to classified information chooses to reveal it, or unless the evidence becomes so overwhelming and public that it cannot be suppressed any longer. What we can say with certainty is that the mystery of Die Glocke has become more than a historical question. It has become a contemporary one, a window into questions about how our governments conduct research, about what technologies they might be developing in secret, and about whether the lessons of the past are being learned or forgotten. The fact that intelligent people continue to investigate Die Glocke, that researchers continue to seek documents and testimony about its existence, and that the legend refuses to die, despite the lack of definitive proof, suggests that there is something about this mystery that speaks to something deep within us, something about the hidden history of World War II, something about the possibilities of science, and something about the kinds of knowledge that might be too dangerous to pursue, but too tempting to resist. As we stand at the threshold of new scientific breakthroughs, as we develop new technologies that would have seemed miraculous to previous generations, and as we continue to uncover secrets from the past that have been buried for decades, the question of Die Glocke becomes more relevant, not less. We must ask ourselves whether we are repeating the mistakes of history, whether we are investing in research that could transform humanity or destroy it, and whether we have the wisdom to handle the knowledge that science is continually revealing to us. The story of Die Glocke, whether it was a real Nazi weapons program or merely a persistent legend, serves as a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is never morally neutral, that power and danger are always intertwined, and that the greatest scientific achievements of one era easily become the greatest threats of another. In the end, Die Glocke may be remembered not for what it actually was, but for what it represents: the eternal human drive to push the boundaries of what is possible, the eternal danger of that drive when pursued without ethical consideration, and the eternal mystery of what might be happening in the hidden laboratories of the world, right now, while we sleep.